Good evening and welcome to a re-recording of part 2 of the New Materials Outlook from Hendy Consulting, the specialist management consulting firm for the $125 billion display industry. And a friend of mine in the industry said that the recording the first time round on this didn't come out very well and wasn't loud enough, so I'm going to try again so that hopefully people can hear me. And so what we wanted to do was start with a recap of where the top opportunities are in the display industry for new materials at this point in time. And then from there move on into the remaining key points in our top 10 or top 12 list on things that people should think about. So it's pretty clear still that the innovation that SDC introduced in foldables and other form factors like that creates materials opportunities right through the stack, with new materials being used to make the overall thing more robust but also thinner. The top right two here then are quantum dots versus micro-LEDs versus all types of other emitting materials, and those remain hot topics and areas of materials expertise right now. The whole headset space is booming, and that's creating real interest in the 4 or 5 different technologies that support AR and in pushing further on performance improvement for those technologies serving VR, plus all the associated waveguide materials and optics. So all of those areas are hot topics for new materials. From my point of view, the 10 to 20 year history of the display industry recently has been about dynamic range and colour gamut, and things to do with that, but also to do with healthy blue, are also continuously important, with people innovating with colour points. You're seeing perovskites trying to get new greens, new versions of KSF reds to try to get into real reds, and quantum dots also being used in this space. So still a range of innovation within colour gamut. And finally, I would say that Apple really turned the lever on lower power with LTPO. So there may be some further materials innovations related to refresh rate and lower power in displays. So what we wanted to do here was the second half of the list here, from point 7 through point 12, of things that are useful if you're a general manager new to the display business but with an electronic material and wanting to introduce it to the display industry. And I think the first thing that always rings alarm bells for us if we're talking with a client about a material here is when they say they have a process or a material that is actually LCD-like. Well, LCD-like is actually a very dangerous thing to say when it comes to LCD lines, because even if it's sometimes only a material changes the line balance between PVD and CVD in a display fab, then that in itself could be a potential issue. So we're always very concerned when people talk about electronic materials, exactly what is the equipment and what is the actual impact of trying to do this. If there are fundamentally new equipment systems needed to deliver these things, then that has to be brought to the table, and probably the materials company needs to help bring the equipment party to the table. Otherwise it's going to face a very difficult challenge. So LCD-like is a very challenging thing. The next one we wanted to say is make sure you really understand the downstream economics of what your material causes. And this is a very old case example, and it's talking about actually Sharp's rededication of its Kamiyama fab to IGZO. But the point is genuinely that if you're going to introduce a new material, you have to think about the capital implications, the downtime potentially of the factory, what is the business impact on the display company, including risk that they have to take on in adopting your material. And that's something we can definitely help with. And what is really clear for me is that in new electronic materials, if they help deliver something that's new functional value, for example, the ability to be foldable, or for example, to reach a new particular color point or brightness, that is not achievable another way, when you've got something like that, then you've got the highest form of value and you've got some negotiating leverage against a display company. If it's only that you're an incremental improvement in product performance and hence yield, quality or cost, then those things can get introduced, but you don't have as much leverage on the display industry other than when you have a fundamental material that is needed to deliver a new functional value that the display player is interested in. And then I think it's worth saying that I think people will know that there's 40 to 50 players in the display industry, although the top 6 are the most important. And there are videos on my LinkedIn profile of the top 6. I called it 3 pairs if people would like to review that. But what's really important to understand is that they have very different interests in terms of material groups, technologies, and things that they might be willing to take on. So if you are a general manager with a new electronic material, it's really worth seeking out an expert in the space before you try to decide to target everybody. And I think the other thing you need to understand is that some of the value chains are different. Many times we've had people work with us that haven't understood, for example, that the large panel business actually operates in what's called an open cell basis, where the display player doesn't actually add the backlight in the films. And so that's actually done by the set makers. Moreover, there were discussions when touch panel value was moving around about where that was being added in different places. So you do need to actually understand the big picture of the display industry, and sometimes these things are far from transparent on exactly who it is you should actually be talking to, because it may not necessarily be the display company that's the decision maker. Yes, it's always clear that it's about a total stack that's important. So we've worked with plenty of materials companies that can talk very, very clearly about the role of their material, but they then can't talk in the same depth about what is above and what is below, and how what it is they do impacts the total stack. And if you can imagine, if you're owning a $5 billion fab and it only works if every layer works, then the risk in changing out a single layer is actually really quite high. And so it really is about the total stack, and all players should be able to understand how their material fits in with other things around it. And then finally, I think people do understand this in electronic materials, but certainly senior managers and investors tend not to get this, which is there's a whole period of time while you're working with a display company on design in at engineering sample level or even trial mass production where the volumes are very small. But then at some point, the display company is going to ask you whether or not you're ready for the multi-ton level to step up in volume, because if they're going to use this across a whole factory, then you really will see a substantive hockey stick in your volumes. And so that can become a really difficult problem for startups. They're waiting a number of years while materials are in the testing phase, where management's always asking them, when is this going to start? And then it does, and they have a different problem, which is having the capacity ready to put it all online to serve the customer at the end of the day. So it's not an easy space for startups. So this is then our list of key points, and certainly I hope that you've picked up through this that an advisor who understands the display industry very well can help new materials companies navigate through some of these important points. We've tried to highlight where the key opportunities are in 2023, and also talk about what the key challenges are and things you should think about in bringing a new material to market. So I hope that's a lot louder and clearer the second time round. Thanks.